In this lesson, we're moving on to the next option. Again, we're in manual mode. It's this one on the bottom. It looks like a little ring of little squares, I guess, and it's the picture style mode. You can also get to this option if you press the Q button and you're on this menu and you get up to this A option to the left of white balance. So if we go in there, we can see what picture styles are. So if we go through them, you have sort of an auto, you have standard, portrait, landscape, fine detail, neutral, faithful, monochrome, and then you can actually create your own styles. So remember when we saw the dial up here where we had some custom filters and creative looks? This is kind of similar in the sense it has to do with how your image is actually going to look. Things like sharpness, contrast, saturation, tone. If we go into one of these and we press the info button, it gives us more information. And you can see this menu. And it has sharpness. I'm gonna skip those three for a second. Oh, let's go back. Down below we have contrast, saturation, and color tone. So for example, the standard look is going to be the standard Canon look that most people come to know with their Canon camera. It has a certain type of color, it has a certain type of sharpness, contrast, and warmth or tone, warmth to coolness, basically. If we go to the next option, you can see that these numbers start to change. So 411, 444, 022, 022, 344. And so with each of these settings, it creates a certain different look. So with portrait, it's gonna end up being a little bit softer. With landscape, it's gonna be a little bit more saturated and sharp. If we go to fine detail, it's gonna be even sharper to try to get that fine detail if you're taking a picture of something a little bit more intricate or small and you want that detail. Neutral will be a little bit less saturated, give you a little bit more room for editing yourself. Faithful, monochrome, those are more stylistic. Monochrome, for example, is just gonna be black and white. Or you have these user settings that you can go in and you can actually go in and edit these yourself. Some people, if you go online, have their own presets for the picture styles and you can kind of go in and copy their styles. I generally leave this option on auto or standard myself because when you shoot in RAW format, which we haven't covered yet, but in terms of the settings for the format of your photos you're taking, you have RAW and JPEG. RAW is uncompressed, JPEG is compressed. There's a little bit of processing done to the JPEG image to compress it, and that actually ends up making the image look a little bit different, a little bit more saturated, a little contrasty compared to the RAW image. But I like having the raw, unedited, uncompressed image so that I can control all of those things myself. And if you're shooting in a RAW format, you can do all of these types of color adjustments, contrast adjustments, sharpness adjustments, tone adjustments in your editing application. But if you want to do everything in camera, you have these picture styles that give you that sort of option. If you look up Canon picture styles on Google, you'll find great articles that kind of list out what all of these styles look like, when to use them, but it is a little bit self-explanatory if you go through that menu. And again, just play around with it. And that one is one of the options I would probably use before moving up to these creative filters up here if you want to have specific looks in your camera. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're moving on to our next setting, which is the drive mode. So this is the little button to the left on the plus sign, or if it's not there for your camera, it's going to look like a stack of photos or a stack of rectangles. You can also get to this option by pressing Q when you're on this display, and it's going to be this one right here, the little A, or if you're using the Q menu right here, if you press Q, it's gonna be this one right here. It's kind of hard to see if it's on a different mode, but if you scroll through it, it's gonna have these options. So the drive mode is basically going to allow you to take multiple photos at once, or set a timer. So if I scroll through these, you can see single shooting, high speed continuous, low speed continuous. You have a self timer, so a 10-second. You also have a 2-second timer, and then you also have a continuous timer. So this means on this last one, it's gonna take multiple photos, but with a pause in between. Now, the first couple options there, you have the continuous modes. So one is high and one is low. So if I turn this on, so let's go back to the first one. So single shooting mode. So this means if I take a photo, if I press the shutter release button down and I'm holding it down, I'm still holding it down, it only takes one photo. If I go to the next option, high speed continuous, you gotta press set to engage. You can see that it's taking multiple images. Low speed continuous is going to be the same thing, but at a lower speed. So you can probably hear that. And then the rest are kind of self-explanatory. We got the timer, the 10-second remote, or the 10-second timer, and then the 2-second timer. And then like I mentioned, the self-timer continuous, this is gonna take multiple photos with a pause in between. Rate at which your camera takes photos in these continuous or burst modes is going to be different depending on your model. The higher end Canon DSLRs can shoot faster than the lower end ones, and that's why a higher end model is sometimes better for things like wildlife photography, sports photography, where you would use this mode to continuously capture images with one click of the shutter button. This is great for tracking objects, so this combined with our autofocus mode, AI server mode, this is great because I could be taking photos. Let's set myself up to high speed continuous. And I could be taking photos tracking something like that, and it's also going to be focusing while I hold the shutter button down. If I'm doing continuous mode and something's moving towards me or away from me and the focus needs to change, and I'm not on the AF server mode, I'm just on the one-shot mode, then the focus is going to be off. So that's what the drive mode setting is. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to move up to the white balance option. So here on this plus pad, it is the WB button here. If you're in the Q mode, you'll go up to this button right here, AWB. So if we scroll through these, you see all of our different white balance modes. You got your auto, you have daylight, shade, cloudy, tungsten, white fluorescent, flash, and then a custom option. So first off, to understand white balance, basically it is how your camera reads color temperature. Every light source has a temperature to it, and it goes from a warmer to a cooler temperature, meaning a more orangish light to a more blue light. So if you think about a candle, it's going to be a lot warmer and yellow and orange than something like a fluorescent light or an LED light that's a little bit cooler. Of course, now LED lights and even fluorescent lights come in different temperatures as well. And you'll see that if you go to the store and you get different temperatures of light bulbs. But this is a pretty easy thing to set up here if you know you are in a specific setting. For example, if you know you're gonna be out in the daylight, or if you're gonna be in the shade, or if it's cloudy out, and you're looking at your photos and the colors seem a little bit off, you might wanna check out and set one of these options manually. Typically, auto white balance is gonna be great, and with most Canon DSLRs nowadays, I would just leave it on the white balance mode. The other thing to note though too, just like in some of the past settings, if you are shooting in RAW mode and you're getting the full RAW images, you are going to have full capability of adjusting the white balance after the fact while editing, so you can change the temperature and have a full resolution file still to work with. So really, you don't necessarily have to do this in camera because most editing apps have that option to change the color tone or the temperature from warm to cool. It's also an option if you want to have a style to your photo. If you like your photos to be a little warm or a little cool, you can use one of those preset settings. One other note about white balance, there's also an option called white balance shift. So if I press the Q button, you'll see that next to the auto white balance option or the white balance option, there's this white balance setting. So here, if you press the set button, you see a grid of colors. On the left, it's blue. On the right, it's red. On the top, it's green. On the bottom, it's magenta. So we can actually move using the plus pad, our point, to make our images more blue, green, pink, or magenta, or red. Sometimes if you're using a very specific type of light bulb, for example, a flash or a continuous light bulb, if you're doing like portraits or headshots, sometimes those lights give off a very subtle green or magenta hue to it. And so that's where you would go in there and basically compromise by adding a little bit of color to the other side. So this is a very, very sort of advanced way to adjust your white balance to get a very specific color. But I did want to just show that option for you as well. All right, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next lesson.